It's here. 63-64. Something happened at Bad Hamburg that nobody is talking about the way they should be. A match finished, the crowd applauded, and then the world moved on to the next story like it always does. But here's the thing. What just happened on that grass court in Germany was not a feel-good moment. It was not a footnote. It was a signal. And if you missed what that signal actually meant, then you missed the most quietly shocking thing that's happened in women's tennis this entire year. A 17-year-old girl from the Philippines just walked onto a surface that breaks experienced professionals. She stood next to a woman who has won 7 Grand Slam singles titles. And then she did something that nobody predicted. Nobody fully prepared for, and nobody can now unsee. This is that story. But to understand why it matters, we have to go somewhere darker first. We have to go to the part of Alex's journey that doesn't get talked about in highlight packages. Because the girl who walked onto that court at Bad Hamburg didn't arrive there by accident. She arrived there through something much harder than talent. And once you understand what she came through to get to that moment, everything that happened on that court hits completely differently. Most people who follow tennis casually know a version of Alex. Young, Filipino, exciting, rising. They've seen the clips, read the headlines, absorbed the general shape of the story. But the general shape is not the real story. The real story lives in the specific moments. The quiet training sessions in a country where tennis is not the national obsession, where the infrastructure doesn't hand you anything, where every opportunity has to be earned with twice the effort because the path is twice as steep. The real story is what it costs to become a serious tennis player when the world you grew up in wasn't designed to produce them. And Alex paid that cost consistently, without complaint, without asking for recognition. 4 years before anyone outside of junior tennis circles was paying attention, that's important context. Because what you're about to watch, what happened at Bad Hamburg, is not a beginning. It's a convergence. Everything she built, every sacrifice that was made, every hour of work on footwork and volleys and decision-making under pressure, it all arrived at a single point on a grass court in Germany. And said here, this is what it was for. But let's talk about Venus first. Because Venus is the layer of this story that changes its entire weight. When the pairing was announced, most people reacted the way people react to novelty. They smiled. They thought it was lovely, a legend and a rising star. What a wonderful image. And then almost immediately, they began quietly calculating how long the partnership would last before the gap between them became visible on the court. That's the assumption that was running underneath everything. That Venus was the real story and Alex was the charming subplot. That the crowd would applaud the legend and politely acknowledge the teenager. That reality would eventually separate inspiration from performance. Here is where reality had other plans, because Venus Williams walking onto a grass court is not Venus Williams the symbol. It is not Venus Williams the history lesson. It is Venus Williams the competitor, and those are completely different things. The moment she stepped onto that court, something in her body language made it immediately clear that she had not come to Germany to be gracious. She had come to win. Her serve in those early games was not nostalgic. It was aggressive, deep, precise, the kind of serve that compresses time for the person trying to return it, that takes away choices before the mind can even generate them. Her movement was sharp. Her court awareness was alive. And the way she tracked everything happening on the opposite side of the net told you that whatever people had assumed about where Venus Williams is right now was probably wrong. But here's the thing nobody was ready for. Venus wasn't the most surprising person on that court. Let that sit for a second. Because when you go back and watch what happened in those early games, when you track the ball and the players and the decisions being made in real time, there is a moment, a specific, undeniable moment, when you realize that the 17-year-old is not just keeping up. She's contributing in ways that don't make logical sense for someone her age on this surface. Grass is not a normal test. This needs to be understood fully before anything else. Grass is where the sport becomes almost cruel. The ball stays low in ways that punish hesitation. The pace is unforgiving in ways that expose every technical gap you haven't closed yet. Your footwork has to be so deeply automatic that conscious thought is no longer part of the equation. Because there is no time for conscious thought. Experienced players have described the grass court as the surface that finds everything you've been hiding. Every technical flaw, every mental weakness, every gap between what you think you can do and what you actually can, and then it uses those things against you with no mercy and no apology. Veterans struggle on grass. Talented young players routinely look lost on grass. The learning curve is steep and unforgiving, and it typically takes years of specific, repeated, high-stakes exposure before a player starts to feel genuinely comfortable out there. Alex is 17, and she looked comfortable in ways that had no business existing yet. Watch her footwork in those early games, and you're watching someone who has done serious, specific, deeply internalized work. The small adjustments on low balls, the weight transfer on approach shots. The way she made decisions about when to attack and when to pull back, not as calculations, but as instincts. As automatic responses built through repetition that has gone somewhere permanent inside her. That's not something you fake. That's not something that shows up by accident. That's the result of work that went deep enough to become part of how she plays rather than something she's consciously trying to remember in the middle of a match. But even knowing that, even understanding the work she'd put in, nothing fully prepared the crowd for what happened when the pressure started. Because Harrison and Osborne were not passive opponents. They were experienced. They were physical. They understood exactly what they were facing. And they had come with a plan. And for a window, that plan started working. The first set was going Alex and Venus's way. 6-3. Clean, professional, the kind of set that sends a message. But the second set opened differently. Harrison and Osborne came back with something changed in them. More aggressive, more willing to take risks. And they started doing something that is a classic calculated move when you're facing a legend alongside a younger player. They targeted Alex, specifically deliberately in the moments where pressure was highest. They wanted to find the line between confidence and composure and push right through it. They wanted to create a situation where the adrenaline and the stakes and the attention all converged on that 17-year-old and asked her one very clear question. Are you actually here, or are you just visiting? The match tightened. Games got longer. Rallies became more contested. The crowd got quieter in that specific way. Crowds get quiet when something uncertain is developing, and they can't tell yet which direction it's going to break. And in that quiet, in that suspended moment of genuine uncertainty, Alex did something. Not immediately, not loudly. She let the pressure come to her. She absorbed it. And then in the middle of a rally that had gone on longer than any other in the match, in a moment that had the weight of the entire story compressed inside it, she produced a shot that should not have existed. The angle was wrong. Her court position made it nearly impossible. Every variable said the shot wasn't available, and she hit it anyway. Clean, unreachable, and the crowd erupted not just in applause, but in that specific sound that crowds make when they've witnessed something that surprised them. That mixture of noise and laughter and collective disbelief that's really just a group of people asking the same question at the same time. How did she see that? How did she get there? How is a 17-year-old on a grass court in Germany answering pressure like this? And Venus noticed. Venus has spent decades on professional courts. She has stood beside the greatest players who have ever played this sport. She knows what a statement looks like. She knows what it feels like when someone on your side of the net decides quietly and completely that they are not losing today. She looked at Alex in that moment, brief, understated, but if you were watching closely enough, you saw it. And what it said without words, without ceremony, was this. You belong here. Now, let's talk about what was actually happening between them throughout this match, because this is the part of the story that doesn't show up in score updates. The connection that was forming between Alex and Venus on that court was not supposed to exist yet. Court chemistry between doubles partners is something that takes weeks to build, sometimes months. You can train with someone endlessly and still feel disconnected from them the moment a real match begins because training is not pressure and pressure changes everything. But what was developing between them in those games was visible to anyone paying close enough attention. They were communicating in the way that only happens when two players are genuinely instinctively reading each other. Not just with words between points, with positioning, with timing, with those tiny, almost invisible adjustments that happen when trust is real rather than assumed. One takes when trust is real rather than assumed. One takes the line and the other covers the cross. Not because they drew it up beforehand, but because they felt it. Because when two players are completely locked into each other on a court, tactics stop being decisions and start being instincts. That kind of connection forming in a matter of days at this level under this pressure is not normal. And the fact that it happened at all, The fact that it formed fast enough to be visible in a competitive match tells you something about both of them. About Venus, who brings out that kind of responsiveness in people who are genuinely ready for it. And about Alex, who is genuinely ready for it at 17 in a way that should make every person watching her career recalibrate their timeline. Because here is what nobody is saying loudly enough. Alex is no longer a story about potential. Potential is a word people use when they see something real, but they need more time before they're willing to commit to it. What happened at Bad Hamburg was not potential. It was proof. Real, undeniable, match-tested proof delivered on the surface that exposes everything against opponents who tried to take it from her. In a match where the stakes were high enough that there was nowhere to hide if she wasn't actually ready, she was ready. She passed every test the match put in front of her. The grass court footwork test, the composure under pressure test, the respond when you're being targeted test, the produce something extraordinary when the moment requires it test. She passed all of them in one afternoon on a court in Germany, and Wimbledon hasn't even started yet. That sentence deserves to be sitting with you for a moment, because if you understand what Bad Hamburg meant, if you understand the level of what was demonstrated there, then the idea of Alex walking into Wimbledon with this grass court confidence and this momentum and this specific knowledge about herself that she didn't have 3 months ago, that should create a very specific feeling in you. Not general optimism, not vague hope, a precise evidence-based anticipation rooted in what you just watched happen. But the thing about this story that goes deepest is not the tennis. The tennis is the surface. Underneath it is something more enduring, something that will matter long after this tournament ends and the next one begins. There's something that happens when a young player experiences a moment like the one Alex experienced at Bad Hamburg. Something that cannot be replicated in training, cannot be approximated in practice, cannot be taught or coached or drilled into existence. It has to be lived in a real match against real pressure with everything actually on the line. Because young players carry a voice, almost every young player carries it. Regardless of how talented they are, regardless of how much people believe in them, regardless of how impressive their results have been along the way, it's a small voice, persistent, quiet, but never fully silent. And what it asks over and over in different ways at different moments is the same basic question. Are you actually good enough for this? Not in training. Not in the controlled environments where confidence is easy. In the real version, the high-stakes version, the version where the opponent is trying their hardest and the surface is exposing everything and the moment is too big to fake your way through. That voice requires a very specific kind of answer, not reassurance, not encouragement, evidence, real, undeniable, earned in the fire evidence that the answer is yes. Alex got that evidence at Bad Hamburg. She got it on the most exposing surface in the sport. She got it with Venus Williams beside her and the weight of real competition pressing against her. She got it against opponents who came ready and tried to take it away and couldn't. And once a player has that evidence inside them, once they have felt what it actually feels like to stand in the fire and not burn, the game changes. Not in a small way, in a foundational way. The ceiling that was defined by assumption starts moving. Not gradually, not slowly. It moves in jumps. Because every layer of self-knowledge a player gains accelerates every layer that comes after it. And the layers Alex is gaining right now at 17 in moments like these are being laid on top of a foundation that was built with remarkable care and remarkable sacrifice over many years in a country that didn't hand her any of this. Think about that origin for a second. Because it's easy to see a young player performing at this level and assume the path here was relatively smooth. It wasn't. Growing up in the Philippines and becoming a serious professional tennis player requires a specific kind of determination that goes well beyond talent. It requires the belief that the obstacles are worth overcoming even when you can't yet see clearly to the other side. It requires people around you who share that belief completely. It requires sacrifice at the level of the individual and the family and everyone who invested their energy in the dream. And it requires the player themselves to keep showing up on the difficult courts, in the difficult conditions, against the difficult opponents, and continue choosing the game over the easier path. Alex chose the game over and over and over. And Bad Hamburg was the moment when all of those choices arrived somewhere visible. When everything that had been built in private showed up in public on one of the sport's most demanding stages and said, "Here, look, this is real." The straight sets victory 63-64 doesn't tell you the full emotional truth of what those 2 sets contained. It tells you the outcome but not the journey. The journey was a psychological roller coaster compressed into a beautiful, difficult, revealing afternoon on a grass court. It had the early fluency, the unexpected chemistry, the mounting pressure, the opponents targeting the youngest person on the court, the moment where everything tightened and the story could have gone in either direction, and then Alex's answer, the shot that shouldn't have existed, the crowd erupting, Venus noticing. The match turning from contested to closed in the way that matches turn when one side decides absolutely that they are not losing and the other side can feel that decision being made, and then the final break, the handshakes, the walk off the court, and Alex knowing something about herself that she didn't know walking on. Here's the final thing, the thing that has been true this entire time, but becomes most visible at the very end of the story. That girl who walked off the court at Bad Hamburg, the one carrying this new self-knowledge and this grass-court momentum and this developing partnership with one of the greatest who ever lived, she is still 17. She is at the beginning. Everything that just happened, as remarkable as it was, is the opening chapter of something that is going to take years to fully reveal itself. And the people who believed in her earliest, who saw her when she was barely a name outside junior tennis, who understood that what she had went deeper than a highlight reel, those people are watching Wimbledon approach with a very specific kind of feeling. It's not surprised. It's not shocked. It's the quiet satisfaction of seeing something they already knew becoming something the entire world is starting to understand. What does it look like when a teenage girl from the Philippines stands on a grass court in Germany next to one of the greatest tennis players who ever lived and shows the world exactly who she is? You just watched it. And Wimbledon hasn't even started yet. And Wimbledon hasn't even started yet.